The conference room aboard the Galactic Defense Council station had been designed for maximum intimidation, vaulted ceilings that stretched up 3 stories. Walls of polished obsidian that reflected everything in dark mirror images. A table carved from a single piece of asteroid mineral that probably cost more than Alice's entire planet's gross domestic product. The kind of room that screamed, "You are very small and we are very important and you should be nervous." Alice was not nervous. She sat at the enormous table with her hands folded on top of a thin plastic folder, the kind you could buy at any office supply store for about $2. Inside the folder were 6 pieces of paper stapled together in the top left corner. She had used a regular stapler. One of the pages was slightly crooked. Across from her sat General Thumara, all 6.5 feet of him, radiating the kind of authority that came from commanding fleets across multiple star systems. His mottled purple and red skin was currently cycling through what Alice had learned to recognize as barely controlled irritation. The chromatophore cells in his face were doing a little dance between dark purple and an angry reddish hue, creating patterns that rippled across his flattened features like oil on water. The 8 thick tentacle appendages that grew from his head, where hair might be on a human, were coiled tight against his skull, which meant he was either very focused or very annoyed, possibly both. His 2 large eyes, with those distinctive amber W-shaped pupils, stared at Alice's folder like it had personally insulted his mother. Next to him sat analyst Quira, who at 5 feet tall looked almost childlike in the massive chair designed for larger species. Her sage green skin had dulled considerably since Alice had entered the room, shifting from a bright, healthy glow to something more like old celery. The crown of petal-like structures around her head had closed up tight, which Alice had learned meant Quira was stressed. The plant-based alien's 3 emerald eyes, arranged vertically down the center of her delicate oval face, blinked in sequence from top to bottom as she stared at the folder. "This," General Thumara said slowly, his small beak-like mouth clicking between words, "is your report on Earth's military history." "Yes, sir," Alice said brightly. "This is your comprehensive analysis of humanity's martial capabilities, strategic doctrines, technological developments, and historical conflicts spanning your species' entire recorded history." "That's right, 6 pages. "Well, technically it's 5.5. The last page is only half full. I probably could have tightened it up." The general's skin flashed bright red for just a moment before settling back into angry purple. One of his tentacle appendages uncurled slightly and twitched. Quira made a small whistling sound through the breathing hole on top of her head, and a puff of grey mist emerged. Alice had learned that grey meant deeply confused. "Commander Alice," Quira said in her soft, melodic voice, "when we commissioned this report 3 months ago, we provided you with access to the Council's entire military history archives. We showed you examples of proper military analysis reports from 263 different species. Some of those reports were thousands of pages long." "Oh, I saw those," Alice said, nodding enthusiastically. "Really thorough work. I especially liked the one from the Krillian Empire. The footnotes alone were longer than my report." "Then you understand," the general said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that made the glasses on the table vibrate slightly, "the level of detail we were expecting." "Absolutely. And yet you submitted 6 pages. 5.5. The general's tentacles all suddenly shot straight up from his head, then coiled back down so tight they looked like they might strangle his own skull. His skin went completely pale pink, which Alice had never seen before but suspected was not a good sign. Quira leaned forward slightly, her bark-textured forearms resting on the table. A small leaf sprouted from behind her left ear and immediately turned brown. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding about the assignment. "No, I don't think so," Alice said cheerfully. "You wanted a comprehensive report on Earth's military history, so I wrote down everything important." "Everything important," the general repeated slowly. "Fit in 6 pages. 5.5. Your species has been engaged in organized warfare for approximately 10,000 years. give or take. You have fought wars on every continent of your planet. You have developed weapons ranging from sharpened sticks to nuclear devices. You have countless military strategists, thousands of documented battles, entire libraries dedicated to the study of warfare. We do like to fight, Alice agreed. And you condensed all of this into 6 pages. Yes, sir. There was a long silence. Quira's petals had wilted so much, they were now hanging limply around her head like a sad hat. She reached up with one slender hand and gently touched one of the petals, which crumbled slightly at her touch. The general slowly pulled the folder across the table toward himself. His thick, powerful hands, with their textured nodules across the knuckles, opened the cover with surprising delicacy. Alice watched his W-shaped pupils dilate and contract as he began to read. His skin immediately flashed red. "This," he said, his voice tight, "begins with I joined the army when I was 19 because my friend Jenny said it would be fun." "Well, that's the personal context," Alice explained. "You know, to establish perspective. The second paragraph," the general continued, his tentacles starting to writhe independently of each other now, "is about how you failed the physical fitness test twice before they lowered the standards. They really did lower them, though. I'm not making that up." Quira leaned over to read along with the general. Her 3 eyes widened in sequence, top to bottom, and her skin went even duller. The third paragraph describes an incident where you accidentally drove a transport vehicle into a mess hall. In my defense, the brakes were not clearly labeled. "There is an entire page," the general said, and his voice had gone very quiet now, which was somehow more terrifying than when he'd been rumbling, "dedicated to something you call the Great Porta Potty Incident of 2073. That was a significant logistical failure that exposed critical vulnerabilities in our forward operating base infrastructure," Alice said seriously. "You locked your commanding officer in a portable toilet. I didn't lock him in. The lock malfunctioned while he was inside. Completely different thing." The general flipped to the next page, then the next. His skin was now cycling through colors so fast it looked like a weird alien disco ball. Red to purple to pale pink to dark purple to bright red again. The tentacles on his head had given up any pretense of dignified military bearing and were now whipping around like they were trying to escape from his skull entirely. Quira had started making a continuous low whistling sound, and grey mist was pouring from her breathing hole like a sad humidifier. 2 more leaves had sprouted and immediately died, falling onto the table with tiny rustles. Section 3, the general said, his voice shaking slightly, is titled Things I Broke During Basic Training. I numbered them for easy reference. There are 23 items on this list. I rounded down. You broke a tank. Well, part of a tank. The important parts still worked, mostly. Quira picked up the page with trembling hands. Section 4 is called My Deployment to Germany, where nothing happened, but I ate a lot of schnitzel. Accurate title. This is 3 sentences long. It was a quiet deployment. The general had moved on to the 5th page now. His eyes were so wide that Alice could see the blood vessels around the edges, which she hadn't even known cephaloid species had. His small beak mouth had fallen open slightly. Section 5. The time I got promoted by accident, and everyone was too embarrassed to fix it. That really shows the flexibility of Earth's military hierarchy, Alice offered. You, the general said slowly, were promoted to commander because someone filed the wrong paperwork, and by the time they realized the mistake, you had already been in the position for 6 months. And I'd done a decent job. That's in the next paragraph. You describe your job as mostly staying out of the way and letting people who knew what they were doing handle things. Effective delegation is a key leadership skill. One of the general's tentacles slapped down on the table hard enough to make Quira jump. His skin flashed so bright red it almost glowed. Where, he demanded, his voice rising, is the analysis of Earth's strategic military doctrine? Page 3, paragraph 2. I mentioned that we usually just throw a lot of people at problems until they go away. That is not a military doctrine. It's worked pretty well for us. Where is your discussion of technological development, weapons systems, naval capabilities, air superiority tactics? I mentioned that we have jets now. That's on page 4. One sentence. You dedicated one sentence to humanity's entire aerospace military development. They're pretty self-explanatory. They're planes, but they go really fast and sometimes have missiles. Quirrell was now slumped in her chair, her willow build looking even more fragile than usual. Her petals had completely wilted and were starting to turn brown at the edges. She was still whistling softly, and the grey mist had formed a little cloud above her head. The final section, she said weakly, is titled, "In conclusion, I learned a lot and only caused 3 international incidents, one of which was technically not my fault." Strong closing, Alice said. The general carefully, with shaking hands, closed the folder. He placed both palms flat on the table. His tentacles had all gone completely limp, hanging down past his shoulders. His skin had settled into a color Alice had never seen before, sort of a pale lavender that suggested his chromatophores had simply given up entirely. "Commander Alice," he said quietly. "Yes, sir? Do you understand that the Galactic Defense Council needs this information to assess whether humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability?" "Oh, sure." "Do you understand that your species is applying for membership in the Council, and that this report is a critical component of that application?" "I do." "Do you understand that multiple civilizations, some of whom have been observing Earth for decades, are deeply concerned about humanity's apparent enthusiasm for violence and warfare?" "That makes sense." "Then why," and his voice was barely a whisper now, "did you submit 6 pages about your personal military career, most of which consists of accidents and minor disasters?" Alice smiled and leaned forward slightly. "Because you asked me to write about Earth's military history, and I'm Earth military, so I wrote about my history. You want to know what humanity's military is really like? It's me. We're all just kind of making it up as we go along, trying not to break too much stuff, and somehow we keep accidentally succeeding anyway." The general stared at her. Quirrell stared at her. The room was completely silent, except for the soft whistle from Quirrell's breathing hole. "That's not," the general started. "We don't have a grand strategic vision," Alice continued. "We don't have some brilliant military philosophy passed down through generations. We have a bunch of people who signed up for various reasons, most of them stupid, and then we train them just enough that they don't shoot themselves, and then we point them at problems and hope for the best. And somehow, despite the fact that I once caused a battalion-wide evacuation because I microwaved fish in the wrong building, we're still here." The general's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. "You want to know if humans are dangerous?" Alice asked. "Yeah, we are. But probably not in the way you think. We're dangerous because we don't know any better. We're dangerous because we do things that make sense to us and apparently to nobody else in the galaxy. We're dangerous because someone like me, who has the common sense of a concussed hamster, can end up as a commander and representative to the Galactic Defense Council." Quirrell had stopped whistling. Her 3 eyes were fixed on Alice, blinking in rapid sequence. "So that's my report," Alice finished. 5.5 pages of what Earth military is actually like. If you want me to make up a bunch of stuff about strategic doctrine and tactical superiority, I can do that. But it wouldn't be true. The truth is, we're all just kind of winging it, and we've gotten pretty good at winging it. The silence that followed was profound. The general's tentacles had begun very slowly, uncurling. His skin was cycling through colors again, but slower now, more thoughtful. Purple to red to purple again. Finally, Quirrell spoke. "You drove a vehicle into a mess hall." "Yes, and locked your commander in a bathroom. Malfunctioning lock, but yes. And you broke 23 things during training, that we know of, and caused 3 international incidents. 2.5. The third one really wasn't my fault." Quirrell looked at the general. The general looked at Quirrell. Something passed between them, some unspoken communication that Alice couldn't quite read. Then the general picked up the folder again and stood. His full 6.5 feet of height suddenly made the intimidating room feel even more imposing. His maroon military uniform, with its silver medals, caught the light from the ceiling. His tentacles arranged themselves into something resembling professional composure. His skin settled into a deep, official purple. "Commander Alice," he said formally. "Yes, sir? The council will review your report." "Great. We may have follow-up questions." "I figured. Many follow-up questions. I've got time." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. His large amber eyes with their distinctive W-shaped pupils fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite identify. "Out of curiosity, Commander, the third international incident, the one that wasn't your fault," Alice brightened. "Oh, that's actually a funny story. See, there was this ceremonial cannon, and I thought it was deactivated. And technically I was right, because it was supposed to be deactivated. But nobody had actually bothered to check if it was deactivated. So when Never mind," the general said quickly. "I don't need to know." He left. Quirrah gathered her papers with trembling hands, her petals still wilted, and followed him out without a word. The door closed with a heavy thunk that echoed through the cavernous room. Alice sat alone at the enormous table with her 6-page report, 5.5 pages, technically. She smiled to herself. She'd probably failed. But at least she'd been honest about it. Outside the conference room, in the corridor where the walls displayed peaceful images of various member worlds, General Thumara stopped walking. Quirrah nearly ran into his back. "Sir?" she asked. The general was still holding Alice's folder. He was staring at it like it might explode. "Either that was the most incompetent presentation I have ever witnessed," he said slowly, "or she is far more clever than she appears and just told us exactly what we needed to know about human military capability in the most efficient way possible." Quirrah's petals perked up slightly. "Which do you think it is?" The general's skin flashed through several colors very quickly. "I genuinely have no idea. And that, Analyst Quirrah, might be the most terrifying thing about humans." They stood in silence for a moment. "She broke a tank," Quirrah said finally. "She broke a tank," the general agreed. "And we're considering her species for council membership." "We are. Should I be concerned?" The general looked down at the report one more time, then back at the closed conference room door. "Analyst Quirrah, I think we should all be very, very concerned." The council chamber was even more intimidating than the conference room, which Alice had previously thought impossible. It was circular, with tiered seating rising up in concentric rings, like an ancient amphitheater, designed by someone who really wanted you to feel judged. Representatives from 63 different species sat in those seats, all of them staring down at the small platform in the center where Alice stood. She had been standing there for 20 minutes, while various council members took turns reading her report aloud in tones of increasing disbelief. General Thumara sat in the military section, his purple and red skin cycling through colors like a mood ring having an existential crisis. His tentacles kept coiling and uncoiling. Next to him, Quirrah looked like a plant someone had forgotten to water for a week. Her petals drooped so low they were practically touching her shoulders. And then, a council member from the Luminari delegation was saying, his bioluminescent veins pulsing an agitated yellow in what she calls Section 6. She describes getting lost during a training exercise and accidentally wandering into a civilian shopping center while carrying a weapon. "I returned the weapon," Alice called up helpfully. "You returned it 3 days later. I had to find my way back first." In my defense, the map was upside down. A rumble of concerned muttering rippled through the chamber. Alice watched as council members leaned toward each other, whispering urgently. Several of them were making gestures that she assumed were their species equivalent of, "Is she serious right now?" The council director, a tall cephaloid with darker purple skin than the general and significantly more medals, stood from his central seat. His tentacles were elaborately braided in what Alice guessed was some kind of formal style. "Commander Alice, this council has reviewed military reports from every member species. These reports detail strategic capabilities, command structures, technological specifications, and tactical doctrines. Your report details how you once set fire to a kitchen making toast. In fairness, that toaster was a fire hazard. I probably saved lives. You were in a fireproof building on a military base. Future lives, then." The director's skin flashed red. "You understand that we need to assess whether humanity can be trusted with access to galactic military technology and strategic information." "Right. And you submitted a report that suggests your entire species' military is held together by luck and accidents." Alice considered this. "I wouldn't say luck exactly. More like aggressively optimistic problem-solving." A council member from the Crystalline Coalition stood up, his translucent body chiming softly with agitation. "This is unprecedented. We cannot make a security assessment based on one person's comedy of errors." "It's not a comedy," Alice said. "Well, I guess some parts are funny. The porta-potty thing still makes me laugh." "This is not helping your case," Quirrell whispered from her seat, though in the acoustically perfect chamber, everyone heard it. The director gestured broadly with both arms. "Does anyone else wish to comment on this report before we move to formal deliberation?" A council member Alice didn't recognize stood up. He was mammalian, covered in sleek grey fur, with bioluminescent spots that pulsed a concerned blue. "I have a question for the commander." "Shoot," Alice said, then immediately added, "That's a human expression, meaning please proceed, not an actual suggestion to shoot anything. You describe multiple failures, accidents, and what you call near disasters throughout your military career. Yet you rose to the rank of commander and were selected as Earth's military liaison to this council. How do you explain this contradiction?" Alice thought about it. "Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it? I'm not special. I'm extremely average for a human military officer. Maybe even below average, if we're being honest. And if someone like me can end up here, representing Earth to the galaxy, then you need to understand that's what you're dealing with. We don't have a secret master plan. We don't have some brilliant strategy we're hiding. What you see is what you get." The chamber fell silent. Even the concerned muttering stopped. "Think about it," Alice continued, warming to her theme now. "You've got species here who've been spacefaring for thousands of years, who plan everything down to the smallest detail, who probably have contingency plans for their contingency plans. And you want to know if humans fit into that system. The answer is no. We absolutely don't. We're going to do things that make no sense to you. We're going to solve problems in ways that violate every logical protocol you have. And yeah, sometimes we're going to accidentally drive trucks into buildings or lock people in bathrooms or set off ceremonial cannons that were supposed to be deactivated." General Thumara's tentacles had all frozen in place. His skin had shifted to a color Alice hadn't seen before, sort of a thoughtful purple with red undertones. "But here's the thing," Alice said. "We also accidentally succeed a lot. We stumble into solutions. We improvise our way through situations that should be impossible. You want a detailed analysis of human military doctrine? There isn't one. It's chaos. Organized chaos. Maybe. On good days. But we make it work." The Crystalline Council member chimed sharply. "You're suggesting we should accept humanity into the Galactic Defense Council because you're unpredictable and chaotic? I'm suggesting you should know what you're actually getting. You can reject us based on that. That's fair. But at least you'll be rejecting the real us, not some sanitized version where I pretend we have our act together." The director sat down heavily. His tentacles drooped. "This is highly irregular." "Yeah, that's kind of our thing," Alice agreed. Quirrell stood up slowly, her small frame somehow commanding attention despite her wilted petals. "If I may, Director." Her soft voice carried through the chamber. "I've spent the last 3 months reviewing Earth's history. Not just military history. All of it. And Commander Alice is correct. Humanity doesn't follow standard development patterns. They do things backward. They invent things in the wrong order. They fight wars they should lose, and somehow win them. They break every rule of logical advancement. That sounds like a reason to reject their application, someone called out. Or, Quira continued, and a bit of color was returning to her sage-green skin now, it's exactly the kind of perspective we need. Every species in this council thinks the same way. We plan, we analyze, we proceed logically. Maybe we need someone who accidentally drives trucks into buildings and calls it a learning experience. Alice smiled. That's the nicest description of my career I've ever heard. The director looked around the chamber. We will deliberate. Commander Alice, you will wait outside. Alice nodded and headed for the door. As she passed the military section, General Thumara caught her eye. His skin was settled into a strange mix of purple and what might have been respect. He gave her a small nod. Outside in the corridor, Alice sat on a bench designed for species much larger than her feet barely touching the floor. She pulled out her communication device and started typing a message to her friend, Jenny, the one who'd talked her into joining the army in the first place. So I either just got humanity accepted into the Galactic Council or banned from space forever. Coin flip, really. We'll let you know. She hit send and leaned back, staring at the vaulted ceiling. The door opened. The director emerged, his expression unreadable. His tentacles were arranged in formal symmetry. His skin was official purple. Commander Alice. That was fast. The council has reviewed your report. He paused, and Alice swore one of his tentacles twitched. It is the most honest military assessment we have ever received, possibly the only honest one. So, I'm banned from space? No. Humanity's application is approved, with conditions. You will serve as permanent military liaison, specifically because your report demonstrated what we're actually dealing with. General Thumara will supervise, primarily to prevent you from breaking anything important. Alice stood up, grinning. Really? Really. Though for the record we expect future reports to be longer than 6 pages. 5.5 pages. Do not test me, Commander. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The Council would like to read your full service record, the official one. Alice's grin widened. Oh, that's going to be so much worse than the report. The director's skin flashed bright red, and he walked away quickly, his tentacles agitated. Alice pulled out her communication device again and sent a follow-up message to Jenny. Update. They approved us. Apparently, they asked me to write a report on Earth's military history, and I handed in my own service record. And somehow that worked. Humanity is officially too weird to reject. She walked back toward the conference area, already mentally preparing for General Thumara's supervision, which was probably going to involve a lot of his tentacles coiling in stress and his skin flashing red. But she'd been honest. She'd told them exactly what they were getting with humanity, and they'd accepted it anyway, which meant they were either very brave or very stupid. Knowing the galaxy like she was starting to, probably both. Just like humanity.